Okay, so I've decided to make another sheet of images using the ink technique that I was using on my flagbook pages earlier. And in this case, I'm going to show you how I set the strips up. So I actually set this first piece of tape up right here, and I want the strips to be 3 inches apart. So since my ruler is actually 3 inches, I'm just going to hold it gently there and kind of just line up the piece of tape and press down. It doesn't need to be exact. I mean, I'd like straight lines, but I find that this helps me make sure it's just even a little bit closer, just straight on. Got ruler up, press the tape down, and then I'll do the last one here. So these are each 3-inch spaces. The tape is 1 inch wide, so I actually have ½ an inch of the tape on the paper and ½ an inch off the paper. So in order to start the left-hand side here, I'm going to take one grid ruler and line it up so that it's ½ an inch. That big thick line there is ½ an inch. I'll use that as something to butt this ruler against. Again, I'm not trying to get this exact, but I just want it to be a guide for me. And then I can just line it up with my eye here. And when I'm happy, just press the tape down. Now I want my openings in this case to be 4 inches wide so that I have sort of an oblong thing. So I've got 3 inches here, I need another inch. I'm just going to do the same technique across. I'm going to line up the ruler here with the inch marking, and then I'll line up that one. Now this width here is 4 inches. So now I can take my next piece of tape and line it up here. Press that down, and I'll just repeat that again. And one reason why I am being even a little extra careful on this paper than maybe I would normally be is this paper's actually got a grid line on it. So if I'm off by a lot, it's going to be fairly obvious if I start to apply my ink in later steps. So I do kind of want it to look neat and tidy. So now I have 6 4x3 squares that I can use to ink. If I were being very industrious, I could use these for something else, but I've decided not to do that today for this project. So in the next step, I'm going to take this foam applicator that I've used before. This is from Club Scrap, and one of the reasons I like it is it's got a nice handle on here. It makes it very easy to grip, very easy to work with. And I'm going to use this blue Bayou ink from Stampin' Up. This is just a dye ink, but again, you can use pigment ink or distress ink or any kind of ink in a color that you like. I'm just going to pick some ink up with my applicator, and I'm going to start in the corners. And I want the edges and the corners to be the darkest, so I'm just going to start kind of heavily pushing the ink. I'm always starting from the tape and moving towards the center of the paper. And I find it easier to kind of pull down and across. So I'm just going to do the upper corner on this pass, and I'll do the rest of it later. And then I might kind of sweep it out and sort of just blend in a little bit and make the color the way I want it. I'm just going to repeat that process on all the remaining squares of the paper. Okay, so you can see here now, since I prefer to pull down to the right here, I've actually flipped the paper around because I find it easier to flip the paper than to try and contort my arm. And so I've done those corners, so I'm going to do the other side, and again pulling from the masking tape towards the center and then sort of sweeping so I get a color gradient. And I like to have just a little bit of that gray in the center there, and you can see there that raised line pattern hopefully showing up quite nicely. This is actually from the Club Scrap Workbench collection. I'm not sure if this paper is still available, but it's a really nice light gray color, and it's got a really interesting texture with those grid marks on it. You wouldn't think this would be good for a holiday card, but I actually really am loving this color combination. It's a little more subdued than what I usually do even, but it's a nice color. There we go, so I'll keep going on with that. Okay, so you can see here now I've colored in all of the ink squares, and at this point in the project it really doesn't look great, and it shouldn't look great, and don't worry about that. Everything will turn out fine in the end as you keep layering on color in different images. I'm going to use, it's actually a text image here. It's the Silent Night, although you probably can't read that backwards on the camera. And just a little trick I have is I sometimes take, for these types of stamps, if I line the edge of the ruler up with the bottom of the text, I can see how closely it aligns with the grid block. And I can see, from my angle at least, that this is pretty straight on. And again, I usually don't worry about this too much, but I've got a pretty linear design here, and I do sort of want to make sure that things are lining up nicely. The other thing I do sometimes, if I'm trying to make sure of that, is I'll do a little test image on the side of the image, and I'm going to sort of line my image up with the tape and stamp and see if if it's pretty straight on or if I need to tilt the stamp a little bit. And that's pretty good. That's great. So I want this image to be on the side here. I'm kind of making sure it goes off the edge of the tape, maybe even a little bit more. I'm going to stamp that on there. Again, I'm using the same ink color, that blue Bayou, so I'm going to get a nice tone on tone. It's going to be just a little bit darker with the ink, and that'll be a nice contrast to the background. So the next step that I want is to use this Memories Mist. It's called Whipped Cream, and it will actually create a really nice white, kind of looks like snow on dark backgrounds. And what I found out when I used this yesterday was that it does clog up quite easily. I left it sitting for too long. And you want to shake it up, but you want to hear that metal ball. And if you don't hear that metal ball, then you might have too much sediment at the bottom, and so I actually had to use a craft tool to just sort of scrape it off and sort of loosen it back up again. And I don't want this to be on the top, I want it to be on a middle layer, so I'm going to spray it now before I do my last stamping. And I really like it, so I'm going to go a little crazy. And it's kind of subtle in different areas. In some areas it's very white, in some areas it's not quite so white, but I like that. Okay, and for my last step, my backgrounds are now complete. I have used a heat gun to dry the mist that I applied. I'm going to use this Club Scrap India ink pad and this unmounted stamp also from Club Scrap. And I'm going to just put that right there. You can see we have a nice little manger image, and I'll just put one of those in each of the squares. Okay, so now that I have this manger image in each of the squares, I think no manger is complete without a star, so I'll finish up by putting a star in each of those. I do like to make sure that a lot of these images, you'll see the Silent Night as well as the star, go off the page. Makes it look a little more finished. And now I'm ready to peel the tape off. Now I'm using a brand of tape by Duck called 30-Day Quick Release, I think is the name of it. Sometimes I save the tape, but since I sprayed the mist on top and the tape's quite messy, I won't be saving the tape today to reuse on another project. But this tape comes off extremely easily, even more easily than some of the blue painter's tape that I used to use. But you do want to be very careful as you're taking it off if you're using a tape you're not familiar with. If it's too tacky, you can always apply it to your clothes or to get some lint on it so that it's not quite as tacky to start with. So here you can see the panel now with all of the tape removed. And what I like to do is trim it so that you have a 1/4 inch border around each edge of this. To me, it sort of looks like those old-time photographs with the white border that you used to get. And through the magic of television, I actually did a sheet of these yesterday as I was deciding what design I like the best and playing around with some different stamps. And you can see you can come up with a lot of different types of images. You also might be able to see here that the white spray is much whiter on these images, and I can't really tell you why that is, except that it appears the results from that mist are a bit inconsistent. So if you're looking for something more consistent, you might want to try looking for another product, or I was thinking of even maybe spackling acrylic paint on it might work better for a really white speckle. But there you have the panels, and then you can make those up into cards or books or whatever you want to do with them. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial.